Today we're at the Dubai Autodrome for the UAE Time Attack series, where we're going to be supporting the cars that we set up over the last few days at Mission Motorsport. We've been out here in Dubai for the last week, assisting Mission Motorsport with a lot of setups on a range of cars for the UAE Time Attack series. We've been extremely busy, and we've actually set up about a third of the grid for today. We've been installing our suspension sequence products to upgrade the cars to get the maximum performance out of them for track use. And we've been getting our setups on those cars so we can get these drivers going as fast as possible for the Time Attack series. We've set up a wide range of vehicles as well, so we're going to go take a closer look at some of the ones we've not shown you just yet in the previous videos. So a few of the cars are starting to arrive now, so we thought we'd show you a few of the ones we've done that we haven't filmed just yet. Obviously the GT3RS Club Sport is already here, and a lot of the GT3RSs that we've already set up are in the next door garage as well. But this Yaris is one we've also set up, which is a really cool build actually. It's got full sequential gearbox, running a lot of power. I think it's around 500 brake horsepower this one, and also running the slick tyres. It's got JRZ two-way suspension, which means along with the other components fitted, we've been able to get a really nice setup on this car for the four-wheel drive system. So the other cars we've set up have been rear-wheel drive, most of them Porsches, whereas this is a slightly different approach to setup. Because it's four-wheel drive and it's got a really nice chassis balance, we can focus on getting the car a bit more into an oversteer bias, because it's a much safer chassis to do that with. So you can pull back out on the throttle if needs be. It's a much more inclined chassis to have a bit of oversteer to get the speed. We've also increased the camber substantially to compensate for the slick tyres, and then we've also offset the dampers to get the understeer reduced as much as possible and just help with that chassis rotation to get it turned in. The Yaris is actually plagued with understeer as standard. Being four-wheel drive, that doesn't help. So we've put a setup on this car, including increasing the rake angle to get that nose in, and then when it gets on that throttle, it's going to help get the car around the corner rather than just washing out with all the power that it has. Another car we set up in the last few days is this Ferrari 488 Pista. So this car has had our suspension sequence camber shims installed alongside a full geometry alignment. So already a very, very good car out the box and extremely quick. They do lack the camber as standard, and it's quite notorious among the Ferrari chassis that they need these shims in there to get the front axle switched on. I mean, this car came in with really worn tyres on the outside edges, front and rear, so with the shims now fitted, we're expecting a much better contact patch out on track. So this car can hopefully push a lot faster and hopefully get its new PB. Another very popular chassis out here is the Toyota Supra chassis. So we've been doing quite a bit of work on a few Supras. This one in particular is running around 900 brake horsepower with the current turbo setup. So we've focused on getting the traction down on this chassis, getting those rear wheels with a bit more toe in, and we've played with the camber settings to not only get the cornering grip, but also the straight line traction. So it's quite a fair bit of playing off on this chassis to get this working well. In terms of the front end, we're quite limited as standard with it being fixed in camber. So we've got a set of our top mounts in the air right now, which are due for this car next week. So for the next round, the front end is going to be a lot more switched on. But we're hoping with the setup we've got on this car right now, it's going to be a big improvement over the last time it was out on track. We couldn't come all the way to Dubai and not work on a BMW either, and with the 1M being one of my favourite BMW chassis, we jumped straight on this one to get it as set up as possible. It's got quite a lot of adjustable components underneath this car, as well as the Öhlins road and track coilovers, so we're able to corner weight the car, get the rake angle set, get the camber optimised for this track. We've increased it quite substantially from where it was, so we're hoping to get a lot more cornering force from this car. The driver's actually currently out on track in radicals right now, so he's going to move from the radicals straight into this car and go after his PB as well. So one of the cars we set up at Mission was this GT3RS. One of the really nice features on the 992 GT3RS is from the steering wheel you can control your dampers and your diff, but this means that we can fine-tune the car for each circuit, each driver, and the tyre of choice as well, depending how the car is driving. So what you don't want to do when you go to a track is wind them all to full stiff. That's not how it works. They all start on 0, and you can go negative or positive on bump and rebound, front and rear. One of the main jobs of the shock absorber is to keep the tyre in contact with the ground for as much time as possible. If that tyre is not in contact with the ground, there is no grip. That is your last point of contact for this car to generate grip and go around a corner. So if you go too stiff on your dampers, when you encounter an impact, such as running a curb, it could bounce the car physically up and lose contact from that corner. this would lose the grip on the axle and it would cause understeer or oversteer depending which axle it happened on. That's why we don't want to just wind it up to the full stiff, because when that happens, even in small undulations, if that starts to happen on a very small scale, it'll lead to the car feeling like it's starting to skate and slightly hop through the corner. That's what we're trying to avoid here. So you don't want to just go out on full stiff, because we're trying to avoid that. So the best thing to do is head out on zeros, and you can start increasing the stiffness for the track until you start to feel the car just approaching the point where it starts to feel like it's going to start skating. That is when you've gone too stiff. So that's why we don't want to go out on full stiff, because it will feel like that straight away and you don't want to run that risk. So if you work towards that slowly, click by click, you can get that feel of the car when you've just approached the limit of grip. If you're winding them both up at the same time, front and rear, and the front starts to skate, then you know that the front has reached its limit, but the back might not have yet. So then you can bring the front back down a click and then start working back on the rears. The beauty of the bump and the rebound separation is that you can also control how the car feels under heavy braking and on throttle as well. So if you're getting corner exit understeer, where the front's effectively pitching back up, you could do two things. You could slightly stiffen your rear compression, which would stop the rear squatting quite as fast on throttle, or you could soften off your front rebound, which would allow the front shocks to extend faster as the car is pitching, to keep the front tyres more in contact with the ground on exit to reduce the understeer. If under heavy braking you start to feel like the rear is a little bit loose, which can be a symptom in the 3RS chassis sometimes, and you're really heavy braking from a high speed straight, you could slightly increase your front compression to stop that dive being quite so aggressive to shock load the rear. And again, you could soften off the rear rebound on your steering wheel just to help the rears extend faster again, to stay in contact with the ground under really heavy braking zones. So you can fine tune it from that point. So a really nice way of doing it is to head out on track, work your dampers up to a point and back away from skating front and rear. So you know that's your maximum settings. You don't want to go more than that whilst you're out on track. You can then fine tune those dampers for cornering behaviour, like we just discussed, and braking behaviour by winding down from that position. Another feature adjustable on the steering wheel is your diff settings. So this is a really nice feature for a road car. In motorsport, the diff setting, in terms of how stiff the diff is a very tunable setting that is used a lot within motorsport for different circuits. So you want your diff setting completely different for a fast circuit than you do for a really slow, tight, technical circuit. And it also varies if it's front wheel drive and rear wheel drive. So having this adjustable within the car from the steering wheel is huge, because a lot of times in motorsport, and we've been there ourselves, you've got to remove the gearbox or the diff, you've got to open it up mechanically and insert shims into the diff to increase or decrease the load of the diff, effectively the stiffness of the diff. Whereas within the car, you can do it electronically without having the time, effort, and without having to get dirty. So it's a really nice way to tune the car. The diff is important for mid-corner and corner exit. That's where we're really going to feel those differences. So often when we talk about mid-corner, you can only usually control that with things like your anti-roll bars, your coil spring rates, or your camber. These are all mechanically fixed things, so there's a lot of effort required to alter those things, especially in the middle of a track day. So if you're out on track and you have still a mid-corner oversteer or understeer issue, in this car, you can just tune the diff to fix that. So if we're getting understeer, for example, what we'd like to do is open up the coast a little bit. So this means as we're going around the corner, we're letting the wheels turn a little bit more independently to one another, so it helps the car to rotate. If we make that coast really stiff, it's going to push the car forward, but a bit of making that stiffer is good on a really fast circuit because it keeps the grip in the rear axle. But on the tighter, more technical sections, you want the diff open because you've got a much bigger difference in arc patterns, and you need the diff to open up faster basically through that corner to keep the front end in and stop it being pushed out by the grip from the rear. The other side of the diff control is your diff power. So you've got your diff coast, which is really effective at your mid corner, and you've got your diff power, which is really effective on your corner exit. So you can also, again, tune how the car behaves when you get back on the throttle. So what we've done on this car is we've wound up the diff power slightly, so when we're getting back on throttle, we can get the car hooked up and aggressively pushed out of the corner, so we're increasing the traction at the rear. And what we're looking for there is to get the grip on the rear axle, so when we're hitting the throttle hard on corner exit, we want to go straight to full throttle as fast as possible. We don't want snap oversteer or the wash of oversteer in this car because they come round fast when they come round. So if we wind up that power slightly, it just puts the traction back into the rear end and lets us push the car out to the curb. So inducing a little bit more understeer than we would at corner at the apex of the corner. So on corner exit, we want that little bit of wash, so as we get back on the throttle, we can commit to the power, stay on the power without lifting, and wash right out to that curb, back onto the straight, into the next corner. So it's a really nice way to tune how the car behaves as you roll into the corner, and then as you get back out that corner. So all within here, from the steering wheel, you can change that so quickly, and you can get that effect very, very quickly. So this is why we've set this car to a base setting for today, for this circuit, and then we'll be working with the driver after the first session to get that feedback on how that car is behaving. We'll be able to watch some of the onboard footage to see how the car is behaving, and we can make those adjustments very, very quickly just from the steering wheel. So to get onto these screens, all you need to do is click your drive mode button, toggle to track, and at that point you just press your PASM to control your shocks front and rear, and you can press your PTV plus valve to control your diff front and rear. To adjust the coast, you turn the red dial. To adjust the power, you turn the blue dial. It's as simple as that. You just click it, set it, and then you're off again. So we've got these set to 0, like we said. So we're going to get out there straight away, see how the car's behaving for today's tyre, temperature, and driving style. Then we're going to adjust accordingly to get this car really dialed in for the circuit. Another really nice feature in this car is from the steering wheel again, you can adjust your traction control. So often in cars, you've got a button which is traction on, traction off. In this car, I've only seen this before in the AMG GT3RS as well, which has a manual switch for it, but you have various settings for your traction control, which is a really nice feature and often is in racing cars as well. But it's really nice to see again in a road/track car. So what this means is we can choose how much slip we want on the throttle. So we can either have it fully off, we can have it fully on, or we can choose anywhere between that, so we can let the car have a little bit of slip on corner. So if we want that car just to allow for a little bit of oversteer, and it will measure the angle of the car. So if it's getting a bit out of control, we can set it just away from off. If you want it so we can be in a bit more control ourselves and not rely on the systems of the car, you can keep winding it towards the off. And obviously when it's off as well, so that you're on your own at that point. So it's a nice feature to have. So you can gradually throughout the day build your confidence in the car, and you can effectively reduce the system to make it more drivable if you feel confident enough to do so. So that's the end of the day here at the UAE Time Attack Series. We've come away with 6 first in class and 10 podiums overall, which we're very, very pleased with. A lot of the drivers set their personal bests on the new setups with the new parts that we've fitted, and we've got a very, very happy grid in general. The trip as a whole has been a fantastic experience. We've enjoyed every minute of it with the guys at Mission Motorsport, working with them and their customers, who have been a great group of people. We can't wait to come back for another round, and we'll see what we can do again and try and go after even more podiums.